Moving on, let's get some business for you. Yuka Roy is here with us in the studio. Hi there, Yuka. We're both having a knowing chuckle there, weren't we? We're going to start with the world's biggest blockage, I think we can safely say. Over in Egypt, in the Suez Canal, there is a gigantic tanker that is just stuck and nothing can get through either way.
I mean, that's the size of a football field.
Four football pitches.
4 football pitches.
Yeah, huge.
2 experts are now, expert teams from the Netherlands and Japan are leading efforts to salvage the Ever Given, which is completely blocking traffic in the canal. It could take days or even weeks to free the 400-metre-long vessel, and a growing number of other ships and tankers are causing a traffic jam around it. Some have started diverting to a longer route around the African continent. The blockage is threatening to raise prices of everything from food to electronics to clothes. Now, for more on this, let's cross now to Cairo to speak to our correspondent, Edouard Cousin. Edouard, thank you for joining us now. Now, the blockage is adding more strain to the global supply chain, already disrupted by the pandemic. But, of course, the Suez Canal is also a very important source of income for Egypt. How badly could this impact the local economy?
Yeah, well, it is indeed problematic. As you say, the Suez Canal is a major source of foreign currency income for Egypt. It represents 1.5% of Egypt's GDP. And per month, the revenues from the Suez Canal are $450 to $500 million. So imagine this blockade will last 2 weeks, then we're talking over more than $200 million of missed revenues for Egypt. And on top of that, the chairman of the Suez Canal Authority in Egypt has suggested in Egyptian media that Egypt could maybe compensate for the delays for stranded ships. But the longer this blockade lasts, the more difficult that becomes as well for Egypt.
Now, Edouard, 5 years ago, Egypt spent a lot of money to renovate the canal, which is a century and a half old. And the renovation work, wasn't that supposed to prevent precisely this kind of accident?
I think we're having a bit of a technical problem there with Edouard over in Cairo. We'll try and get him back later in the programme. So,
yeah, I mean, I would like to hear what impact it could have, and especially, with that canal. Let's talk about a little bit of that canal. 5 years ago, Egypt spent 8.2 billion euros to renovate and add a lane.
Make it a bit wider.
Make it a bit wider and 2 lanes. But then, unfortunately, the blockage is happening to the south of that project, so it didn't help.
Bad timing
this time around. Now, dozens of tankers are also waiting on either side of the bottleneck, carrying oil from Iraq to Spain or from Eastern Europe to China. Shipping rates for oil tankers have nearly doubled this week, but so far reactions from the petroleum market have been rather muted. Prices jumped 6% midweek, but the hike was short-lived due to lower demand. If the blockage lasts for weeks, however, it could put pressure on the sector. Now let's turn to what's happening on the stock markets this Friday. And European shares are broadly rising at midday in a mild trading session on hopes of a strong post-pandemic recovery. As you can see, not performing very strongly, but still rising across the board there. A diplomatic row over China's alleged human rights abuses on the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang is having an increasing impact on businesses. Burberry is the latest to face a backlash over its position on the use of cotton produced in the Chinese province, as Beijing slapped new sanctions on organisations and people in the UK. Camille Nedelec has the latest.
These pretty fields of cotton are at the heart of a diplomatic and economic rift between China and the West over the human rights abuses of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang.
所谓中国新疆地区存在强迫劳动，完全是子虚乌有。纯白无瑕的新疆棉花，不容任何势力玷污抹黑。
Burberry is the latest Western brand to come under fire in China, as its brand ambassador resigns rather than work with a foreign firm that refuses to use Tianjin cotton. Dozens of Chinese A-listers have cut ties with Western companies in recent days. H&M is now wiped off the Chinese internet. It was dropped by e-commerce sites, and its 500 shops are no longer featured on navigation apps. 5% of H&M's revenue came from China in 2020. Many of the companies impacted are signatories of the Better Cotton Initiative, which issued a ban on Xinjiang cotton last year. On Friday, the Chinese branch of the organisation said it had not found evidence of forced labour. The backlash against Western brands comes in the wake of Western sanctions targeting China, and shoppers are taking their cue from Beijing.
我觉得在家这个事情，我觉得以后我也可能不会去选择这样的这种品。
China is one of the leading cotton producers in the world, producing almost 6 million tons of it in 2019. And almost all of that comes from the province of Xinjiang.
In the United States, the chief executives of Facebook, Twitter and Google's Alphabet testified in a virtual congressional hearing again on Thursday and defended their companies' actions against fake news and hate speech that have been dividing society. Some lawmakers want to reform a piece of legislation which shields internet companies from liability for user-generated content.
Effigies of tech bosses in front of the Capitol building, set up to look like the January rioters. Campaigners say that tech companies did not act soon enough to clamp down on disinformation and incitement to violence on their platforms.
Tech had a chance. There were so many alarm bells going off about what was going to happen on January 6th, and the big tech companies did nothing to stem the violence.
That perceived lack of action, campaigners argue, is due to protections granted in Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The legislation ensures that social networks, such as Facebook and Twitter, aren't responsible for the content posted by their users. That includes anything defamatory or harmful, as the platform is not considered to be the publisher of that content, but an interactive computer service. It's a law that tech bosses say is crucial for their business.
Our ability to provide a range of information and viewpoints, while also being able to remove misinformation, is possible only because of legal frameworks like Section 230. It's foundational to the open web, which has been a powerful force for good for so many.
But the law was developed in the 1990s, before social media even existed. And both Republicans and Democrats say that it is no longer fit for purpose. After a spat with Twitter, President Donald Trump signed an executive order targeting the law. And President Joe Biden also wants to see it reformed.
That was Camille Nedelec reporting there, and that's it for Business for now.
Thank you very much indeed, Yuka Roy. We're going to take a very short break. Don't go away. This is France 24.